Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Praise the Lord and welcome back to another Good Morning Grief Devotion. It's your boy, Pastor Corey Allen Duncan Sr. So grateful to have this wonderful opportunity to come to you today, lead you in a very special way. In today's Good Morning Grief Devotion, hey, this is the daily grief devotion that is strategically designed to help you to navigate through your grief one day at a time. What is grief? I'm so glad you asked. Grief, my brothers and sisters, it is the natural, normal, and necessary response to loss, change, and transition that results in the expression of feelings and emotions. Grief is what you feel on the inside. Mourning is how you reveal it on the outside. Therefore, we don't suppress it, but we express it. We don't ignore it, but we explore it. We don't conceal it, but we reveal it. We don't lock it up. We let it out. And that's why we shout good morning, because mourning is a good thing. And I'm so glad that you're here with us on today as we lead you in today's Good Morning Grief devotion. Today, my brothers and sisters, is day 84. Thank y'all for coming back for some more. We're going to talk about grief is not the enemy. Grief is not the enemy. I saw a video earlier, and a guy was talking about how it was really a grief wave, how something triggered his grief, and he started crying and all of this stuff. And he was just talking about how grief is the enemy. Oh, grief is the enemy. Grief is the enemy. And y'all, this platform is designed to bring awareness, education, as well as action as it relates to grief. And one thing that we got to be aware of, we got to be aware of the fact grief is not the enemy. Grief is not the enemy. Let's talk about it, y'all. Matthew 5:4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. When sorrow strikes, it's tempting to see grief as the enemy. Something to fight, something to suppress, something to push away. That's what we do, right? It's tempting when sorrow strikes. It's tempting to see grief as the enemy. Something to what? Fight, something to suppress, something to push away. Get away. I don't want to feel it. That's what you do to an enemy. We press it down, we fight, we push away, we suppress it. We don't want to do none of that. We don't want to feel this. I don't want to do this. None of that. It's tempting to see grief as the enemy. But grief itself is not your enemy, right? It's a natural response to love, loss. I say loss, change, and transition, but to love, loss, change, and transition. It's a normal, it's a natural, and it's a necessary response to love, loss, change, and transition. I gotta help you to rewire your brain. I gotta help you to reframe your thoughts. I got to help you to see this thing differently, because grief is not the enemy. Grief is evidence that someone mattered deeply. It's the heart's ways. It's the heart's way of processing what feels impossible to accept. While grief is painful, is also part of the path to healing. Ignoring it only delays the process. I can't read this morning. Let's go back and do that again. Grief is evidence that someone mattered deeply, right? That's why we grieve, right? We grieve hard because we love hard. It's evidence that someone mattered deeply. It's the heart's way of processing what feels impossible to accept. It's your processor. Grief is your processor. It's the heart's way of processing something that seems impossible to accept. I'm trying to accept something that's happened that I really don't like. What's happened? And your heart is trying to process it. Your heart is trying to process it, right? Your heart is processing what happened. Your heart is processing the love and the loss, right? Your heart is processing love. Think when you do something for a computer and you look something up, and that computer starts processing, right? Trying to help you to get to the place where you're trying to go. That's what grief does. Grief is a processor. It tries to help you to get to a place of healing. But in order to do that, it has to process the love and the loss. It has to process the love and the loss. It has to stand in the gap between sovereignty, God's sovereign sorrow and sovereignty. And it's helping you process what has happened, the memories, the minutes, the moments, right? the loss, the change, the transition. So what does that mean? They were here, they're not here. On my birthday, they wasn't. They'll never be there for a birthday, Christmas, and Thanksgiving, and all of these things. And we start to mourn the future we had in mind, and all of this stuff, and is processing. Whenever any of that comes up, grief is the processor. It's your natural, your normal, your necessary response to loss, change, and transition. And that response might be joy, it might be anger, it might be regret, it might be sorrow, but that grief is there to help you to process. It's not the enemy, right? It's the very thing that helps you to process, to navigate through the season, right? Of the loss, change, and transition. Is what helps to get you, right? I want to say it's like a bridge. It bridges the gap between hurting and healing, right? Grief is the process that bridges that gap between hurting and healing. And if you see it as the enemy, right, then the enemy is not trying to help you to get to a place of better. And I'm not saying that it's not painful. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's pain. Going to the gym, lifting weights is painful, right? But do you say the weights are the enemy? When you go and you pressing weight and you doing that, going for a jog can be painful. Do you say running is stupid and this is stupid? Running is stupid. This is the enemy. This is the devil. You may say it in a jokingly manner, but you don't see it as the enemy. You don't see weightlifting as the enemy, right? Yeah, it's painful. I got to lift all these weights and no pain, no gain, and I'm sore the next day. But the weights is what's bridging a gap between an unhealthy you and a healthy you, right? And that pain helps you to process, helps your body to process and go through all of this stuff to get to a place to where you are a better version of yourself. Grief is the process. Grief is the process. Grief is the bridge, right? It's the thing that bridges the gap between your hurting and your healing, right? And it helps you to process what you've lost. Here it is. While grief is painful, it's also part of the path to healing. Ignoring it only delays the process. So when you see it as the enemy and you ignore it, guess what? You're delaying the process. When you see it as the enemy and you ignore it, you are delaying the process, which means you're going to hurt longer, right? When you see it as the enemy and you ignore it, you delay the process. I'm not saying that it's not painful. It's a part of the path, right? It's a part of the process. Instead of resisting grief, allow yourself to lean into it. We don't resist it, we lean into it. I tell you every single day, we don't suppress it, we express it. We don't ignore it, we explore it. We don't conceal it, we reveal it. Instead of resisting it, lean into it. Let the tears fall. Embrace the memories. Sit with the emotions, not as something to fear, but as something to feel. Grief isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that your heart is still working to mend what has been broken. Y'all, I love this. This is so very important. Here it is. Lean into it. Let the tears fall. Embrace the memories. Sit with the emotions. All of that is a part of crossing the bridge. All of that is a part of processing, right? I'm not going to ignore it. I'm going to lean into it. And when I lean into it, I'm going to let the tears fall. I'm going to embrace the memories. I'm going to sit with the emotions, not as something to fear, but as something to feel. Grief isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that your heart is still working to mend what has been broken. The good news is that God meets you in your grief. He doesn't rush you past it. He walks with you through it. Grief may not be part of your journey, but it doesn't have to be your enemy. And it will not have the final say. This is the good news, that God meets you in it. God meets you in it. He does it. Me and my son was talking about the Hebrew boys the other day. He was Sunday on the way to church. He was asking some questions like, yo, Pops, I was reading about blah, blah, blah. And so he had a few questions. And so we was dialogue. I love it. I love it. The fact that, you know, he's just reading, he's asking questions, he's hungering and thirsting for righteousness. And I was saying, yes, son, and let me add this in there. Let me throw this in there with you so you can know, like, he didn't pull them out of it, but he jumped there in it with them, right? He didn't pull them out the fire. He jumped in the fire with them. Because I say sometimes we want it, we want to be removed, but God will allow stuff to remain. And instead of God pulling us out, he'll just jump in. There's certain things he'll jump in with us. That's the way grief is. God, I know you want him to snap his fingers and it's over. God says, nah, you got to go through it. But guess what? I'm going to go through it with you. I'm going to jump in this thing. I'm going to meet you in your grief. That's why the Bible says the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in spirit. It is he who guides us, guards us, and governs us through these pivotal circumstances that we face. And y'all, we can thank God for that. Here's the point of application, y'all. Today, instead of fighting your grief, give yourself permission to feel it. Don't fight it, feel it. Don't fight it, feel it. Don't fight it, feel it. That's going to be the next devotion. Don't fight it, feel it. Cry if you need to. Reflect on memories. Sit quietly in God's presence. Let him comfort you. Grief isn't here to destroy you. It's part of how God is helping you heal. Today, my brothers and sisters, is day 84. I appreciate y'all coming back for some more. Grief is not the enemy. Grief is not the enemy. Grief is not the enemy. Every time I think about my brother Kevin that passed in September, I just says, God bless you, Felicia Henderson. Caroline Kennedy, trust the process. Y'all, hope this lesson was a blessing. Hope this lesson was a blessing. Praying for y'all as you continue to navigate through your grief journey. I appreciate y'all tuning in. Continue to rock with us. Continue to rock with us. We gonna make it. We gonna navigate. We gonna make it do what it do. I appreciate y'all. Love y'all. I'm gonna see y'all tomorrow, same time, same place. Remember, grief is not the enemy.